To make a star team, all you need is a team of stars. Welcome to Friday Fallacy. This week we're looking at the fallacy of composition. The fallacy of composition is when the properties of a thing are inferred from its constituent parts. That is, rather than recognise that something can be more than the sum of its parts, we argue otherwise. This is not a sound way of arguing, as even if all the parts of something have some property, that doesn't mean that the whole does too. That every person has 2 legs doesn't mean that a group of people also has 2 legs. That every member of Mensa has a high IQ doesn't mean that the organisation will behave intelligently. Some examples of the fallacy of composition. If brains are just made of matter and matter can't think, then how can brains? Vaccines are made up of dangerous chemicals, that's why they are dangerous. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore it had a cause. Saving money is good for a budget, so if we all saved more, the economy would recover. If we all vote our preferences, then a candidate who wins will be supported by the majority. Not all inferences from parts to wholes are the fallacy of composition. The fallacy rests on an unwarranted claim that what is true of some or all parts must be true of the whole. This is false as a general rule. However, it can be true in some circumstances, and if this is established, then it is not the fallacy of composition. For example, if the members of a group are all wealthy, then since group wealth is just the total wealth of all its members, it is valid to argue that the group itself is also wealthy. That is, we can reason that since every member of the top 10% in a society is richer than every member in the bottom 10%, then as a whole, the top 10% is richer than the whole of the bottom 10%. What's important here is that the mechanism by which we can reason from individuals to the group is justified. Arguments against philosophical naturalism often rest on this fallacy. It seems intuitive that abstract properties like consciousness, thought, morality, and logical correctness cannot be accounted for by mere matter. That is, since a brain is purely material, that it cannot alone give rise to mental phenomena or abstract quantities. But this is just the fallacy of composition. Just because every component part of the brain is material, doesn't mean that as a whole it cannot produce non-material effects. To argue otherwise, without sufficient justification, is to commit the fallacy of composition. To make it clear, consider that every material component of a living organism is reducible to atomic particles. None of these particles are alive, but somehow the organism can still be. That's because the arrangement of particles determines its properties more than the properties of the actual particles do. Politics and economics also produce many so-called paradoxes that are the result of naive applications of the fallacy of composition. That is, we tend to assume that what is good for one person if they alone do it is also good for society if many people do it. While this is often true, an over-application of this principle is fallacious. For example, individuals can improve their financial position by spending less and saving more. However, if society as a whole spends less, this can result in a recession if the economy relies heavily on consumer spending. In electoral systems, it is well established that all voting systems give rise to situations in which a voter needs to vote against their preferences in order to elect the candidate they actually want. That is, if everyone votes for their preferred candidates, the candidate preferred by the majority may not win. In conclusion, the fallacy of composition is when it is assumed that what is true of the parts is also true of the whole. Until next time, keep your fallacies to yourself.